Breaking news in Washington, where President Biden is about to give a major speech about anti-Semitism at the U.S. Capitol. The event, part of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Remembrance ceremony today. The event marks a rare address from the president about anti-Semitism, a form of hatred that's emerged as a flashpoint in American politics in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war, which sparked a ripple effect of anti-Jewish violence and harassment here at home. The speech also comes as at a critical moment for that conflict and against the backdrop of college protests around the country calling for an end to the war. President, I believe, now entering the room there. We will hear from him momentarily. He's going to go, looks like he's going to go straight to the podium, and we'll listen in.
Thank you, and please. Thank you, Stu Eisenstadt, for that introduction, for your leadership in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. You're a true scholar and statesman and a dear friend. Speaker Johnson, Leader Jeffries, members of Congress, and especially the survivors of the Holocaust. My mother here, she'd look at you and say, God love you all. God love you all. Abe Foxman and all other survivors who embody absolute courage and dignity and grace are here as well. During these sacred days of remembrance, we grieve, we give voice to the 6 million Jews who were systematically targeted and murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators during World War II. We honor the memory of victims, the pain of survivors, the bravery of heroes who stood up to Hitler's unspeakable evil, and we recommit to heading and heeding the lessons that one of the darkest chapters in human history, to revitalize and realize the responsibility of never again. Never again, simply translated for me, means never forget. Never forget. Never forgetting means we must keep telling the story. We must keep teaching the truth. We must keep teaching our children and our grandchildren. And the truth is, we're at risk of people not knowing the truth. That's why, growing up, my dad taught me and my siblings about the horrors of the Shoah at our family dinner table. That's why I visited Yad Vashem with my family as a senator, as vice president, and as president. And that's why I took my grandchildren to Dachau, so they could see and bear witness to the perils of indifference, the complicity of silence in the face of evil that they knew was happening. Germany, 1933. Hitler and his Nazi party rise to power by rekindling one of the world's oldest forms of prejudice and hate, anti-Semitism. His rule didn't begin with mass murder. It started slowly across economic, political, social, and cultural life. Propaganda demonizing Jews, boycotts of Jewish businesses, synagogues defaced with swastikas, harassment of Jews in the street and in the schools, anti-Semitic demonstrations, pogroms, organized riots. With the indifference of the world, Hitler knew he could expand his reign of terror by eliminating Jews from Germany, to annihilate Jews across Europe through genocide the Nazis called the final solution. Concentration camps, gas chambers, mass shootings. By the time the war ended, 6 million Jews, 1 out of every 3 Jews in the entire world, were murdered. This ancient hatred of Jews didn't begin with the Holocaust. It didn't end with the Holocaust either, or even after our victory in World War II. This hatred continues to lie deep in the hearts of too many people in the world, and requires our continued vigilance and outspokenness. That hatred was brought to life on October 7th in 2023. On the sacred Jewish holiday, the terrorist group Hamas unleashed the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Driven by ancient desire to wipe out the Jewish people off the face of the earth, over 1,200 innocent people, babies, parents, grandparents, slaughtered in their kibbutz, massacred at a music festival, brutally raped, mutilated, and sexually assaulted. Thousands more carrying wounds, bullets and shrapnel from the memory of that terrible day they endured. Hundreds taken hostage, including survivors of the Shoah. Now, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget. And as Jews around the world still cope with the atrocities and trauma of that day and its aftermath, we've seen a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. Vicious propaganda on social media. Jews forced to keep their hide, their keepers under baseball hats, tuck their Jewish stars into their shirts. On college campuses, Jewish students blocked, harassed, attacked while walking to class. Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic posters, slogans calling for the annihilation of Israel, the world's only Jewish state. Too many people denying, downplaying, rationalizing, ignoring the horrors of the Holocaust. And October 7th, including Hamas's appalling use of sexual violence to torture and terrorize Jews. It's absolutely despicable, and it must stop. Silence. Silence and denial can hide much, but it can erase nothing. Some injustices are so heinous, so horrific, so grievous, they cannot be buried, no matter how hard people try. In my view, a major lesson of the Holocaust is, as mentioned earlier, was not inevitable. We know hate never goes away, it only hides. And given a little oxygen, it comes out from under the rocks. But we also know what stops hate. One thing, all of us. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs described anti-Semitism as a virus that has survived and mutated over time. Together, we cannot continue to let that happen. We have to remember our basic principles as a nation. We have an obligation. We have an obligation to learn the lessons of history so we don't surrender our future to the horrors of the past. We must give hate no safe harbor against anyone. Anyone. From the very founding, our very founding, Jewish Americans, who represent only about 2% of the U.S. population, have helped lead the cause of freedom for everyone in our nation. From that experience, we know scapegoating and demonizing any minority is a threat to every minority and the very foundation of our democracy. So in moments like this, we have to put these principles that we're talking about into action. I understand people have strong beliefs and deep convictions about the world. In America, we respect and protect the fundamental right to free speech, to debate and disagree, to protest peacefully and make our voices heard. I understand. That's America. But there is no place on any campus in America, any place in America, for anti-Semitism or hate speech or threats of violence of any kind. Whether against Jews or anyone else. Violent attacks, destroying property, is not peaceful protest. It's against the law. And we are not a lawless country. We're a civil society. We uphold the rule of law. And no one should have to hide or be brave just to be themselves. To the Jewish community, I want you to know, I see your fear, your hurt, and your pain. Let me reassure you, as your president, you're not alone. You belong. You always have and you always will. And my commitment to the safety of the Jewish people, the security of Israel, and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree. My administration is working around the clock to free remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already, and will not rest until we bring them all home. My administration, with our second gentleman's leadership, has launched our nation's first national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. That's mobilizing the full force of the federal government to protect Jewish communities. But we know this is not the work of government alone or Jews alone. That's why I'm calling on all Americans to stand united against anti-Semitism and hate in all its forms. My dear friend, and he became a friend, the late Elie Wiesel, said, quote, "One person of integrity can make a difference." We have to remember that. Now more than ever. Here in Emancipation Hall, the U.S. Capitol, among the towering statues of history, is a bronze bust of Raoul Wallenberg. Born in Sweden as a Lutheran, he was a businessman and a diplomat. While stationed in Hungary during World War II, he used diplomatic cover to hide and rescue about 100,000 Jews over a 6-month period. Among them was a 16-year-old Jewish boy who escaped a Nazi labor camp. After the war ended, that boy received a scholarship from the Hillel Foundation to study in America. He came to New York City penniless, but determined to turn his pain into purpose, along with his wife, also a Holocaust survivor. He became a renowned economist and foreign policy thinker, eventually making his way to this very Capitol on the staff of a first-term senator. That Jewish refugee was Tom Lantos, and that senator was me. Tom and his wife Annette and their family became dear friends to me and my family. Tom would go on to become the only Holocaust survivor ever elected to Congress, where he became a leading voice on civil rights and human rights around the world. Tom never met Raoul, who was taken prisoner by the Soviets, never to be heard from again. But through Tom's efforts, Raoul's bust is here in the Capitol. He was also given honorary U.S. citizenship, only the second person ever after Winston Churchill. The Holocaust Museum here in Washington is located on a road in Raoul's name. The story of the power of a single person to put aside our differences, to see our common humanity, to stand up to hate, and its ancient story of resilience from immense pain, persecution, to find hope, purpose, and meaning in life, we try to live and share with one another. That story endures. Let me close with this. I know these days of remembrance fall on difficult times. We all do well to remember these days also fall during the month we celebrate Jewish American heritage. A heritage that stretches from our earliest days to enrich every single part of American life today. Great American, great Jewish American, named Tom Lantos used the phrase, "The veneer of civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we can never rest." My fellow Americans, we must be those guardians. We must never rest. We must rise against hate, meet across the divide, see our common humanity, and God bless the victims and survivors of Shoah. May the resilient hearts, the courageous spirit, and the eternal flame of faith of the Jewish people forever shine their light on America and around the world. Pray God. Thank you all.
President Biden delivering a major speech on anti-Semitism, talking about the lessons of history, that those who are forgetting the lessons of the Holocaust, but of more recent history, those who may be forgetting the lessons of October 7th, and talking about Hamas as the aggressor in that attack. Also, the president talking about what we've seen on college campuses, the free speech, but also those who would utter threatening or harassing language toward Jewish students in some of those instances. We want to go straight to our senior White House correspondent, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, how long has this speech been coming?
Hi there, Lester. Well, what stuck out to me is what you mentioned, that the president really trying to draw the parallels here between the atrocities of the Holocaust and the horrors that unfolded on October 7th. And as you said, he reiterated that people are already forgetting what happened on October 7th, essentially a message appearing to rebuke the protesters that have become violent across college campuses across this country. So far, there have been more than 2,500 arrests across the country, impacting some 70 campuses nationwide. And the White House has been reiterating this message now for several days, trying to really stress that, yes, peaceful protests are encouraged and accepted, but what should not happen is protesters that cause chaos and break the law. And the president was really trying to walk that fine line, and he reiterated that message yet again today. But Lester, this comes at a precarious political moment for the president, as we've been seeing those images of those protests over the last several days. Republicans, for example, have been wanting the president to come out more forcefully against these protests, and some have criticized him for not going far enough. But meanwhile, progressive Democrats have wanted the president to do more when it comes to protecting civilian lives in Gaza. But certainly, Lester, this was a very forceful message that the White House wanted to get across. The president saying that his support of Israel was ironclad, even when we disagree. Lester.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on NBC Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt in New York. Thank you for watching, everyone, and good day. Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.